Well, hello, my friends. This is CK from the Mirths and Monsters podcast, proud partner of the Odd Audio Network. Join me, my companion Finn, and my occasionally satanically possessed cat Ray,
Puny mortals,
as we investigate the real truths behind some of the most wonderful creatures you can imagine. Are trolls really that thick? Or is it just bad press? Are leprechauns really drunken bums? Sort of. But there's a lot more to find out. All you need to do is tune in to Mirths and Monsters podcast with me and Finn. Till next time, sláinte, your good health.
Welcome. Join me on this journey, won't you? You're listening to In the Mix. Hey there, mixers and hide and seekers. This is In the Mix. I'm Mixter Hyde, and I'll be your host and guide on this wild ride. Each week, I talk about culture and interview people making culture, oftentimes other podcasters. I believe that everyone has a story to tell and a message to share, and I intend to hear as many of those as possible. Join me and let's discover something. Hey there, you guys. So I wanted to do something a little bit different today. In honor of episode 30, because we reached episode 30, you guys. What? Craziness, right? Okay, so, I haven't really talked about this, a whole lot, but, well, I think I've mentioned it before just in passing on the show that I'm a writer. That's one of the things I am. However, I don't know that I have ever mentioned that the first podcast that okay, so there are two podcasts that I did before this one. So the first one I did before this one was called The Merman Journalist. And The Merman Journalist, I think we lasted about 6, maybe 7 episodes. And it was not great. I mean, the conversations were fun. So honestly, if you feel like looking those up, you totally can. The conversations were similar to the ones that I had here, but they were very specifically about mermaids. And the second show that I was going to do before this one is a show that is a show that honestly was spawned because of Myths and Legends. Myths and Legends being one of my favorite podcasts out there that I listen to every week. So that particular show that I was going to do was going to be called Creatures of Legend. So I guess periodically I might just pop on here and do one of those old-timey episodes and do them and just put them in right before the actual episode. Because I have some of them written and I just honestly don't want to leave them here because they're fun. And I want to share them with you. So hopefully you enjoy this. If you don't, I am so sorry. And if you're coming here specifically if you're coming here specifically for the second half of my conversation with Scott Thrower, you can entirely have that. I will include in the box I will include in the show notes the timestamp so you can skip over this part if you would like. But I highly recommend, listening to me because you're doing it already. So anyway, here we go. So I guess I'll just dive right in, which honestly is a little bit of a pun that I didn't mean to have happen just there, but I guess it did. Look, mate, it went like this, alright? I saw her, I swear. Tried to kill me, she did. Same story you hear from all our types, right? You're not a sailor till you've had a run-in with one of them, have you? We were in port, and I was right knackered as I staggered out of the bar. I stumbled out, still holding on to my flask, singing a merry tune about a lass I'd encountered a few weeks back. I was stumbling, and I was on a pier. I tripped on a wood plank and landed on my chest. I pushed myself up and looked out towards the sea. That's when I saw her. Her skin shone in the moonlight, shone like the finest pearl you'd ever seen. She swam to meet me at the edge. My head filled with song, and I no longer felt the liquor in my veins. I wanted to be hers. I wanted to be with her. Nothing seemed more important to me in that moment. She touched my cheek, and her palms were so cold. She pulled my face toward hers, and our lips almost touched. There was a voice in my head that kept saying, "Kiss her, mate. Go on, just do it. Just kiss her, mate." She kept trying to pull me down into the sea, face first. It was then that I noticed what she was. I pulled back and regained my composure. I fell onto my backside, and she rose up before me. The water seemed to lift her, and it carried her onto the wood of the pier. Gone was the pretty face I'd been staring into moments before. She was angry, and bared her fangs toward me. She had rows of angry teeth, like a shark. I was to be her meal, and I was getting away. She was furious. I reached and grabbed my pistol from my belt, and I fired it in her general direction. I managed to hit her in the shoulder. She screeched and fled into the ocean depths. Where she bled on the wood, I could only see silver pools of moonlight. My name is William, and I survived a meeting with a creature of legend. Okay, so apologies to everybody for that accent, but, well, I figured it had to be done and figured it was worth it. Anyway, so today's creature needs very little introduction. It is, well, the mermaid. So there are different kinds of mermaids and mermen. And they are depicted in all of these different cultures around the world. Honestly, they're everywhere. It's a little bit crazy. Now, I'm sure you have heard of some of these, of some of the different kinds of mermaids. And in this particular case, we're only going to touch on, today's just going to be a brief overview of what a mermaid is, and, you know, all the things that go into mermaids and whatnot. So first, you know, a general good thing to do when talking about creatures of legend is to define what a mermaid is. So a mermaid specifically is a creature with the upper body of a woman and the bottom half of anything from the fish superclass, the Osteichthyes. Yes, the Osteichthyes superclass, which is fish with bones, or the, Chondrichthyes? Yes, Chondrichthyes class, which is sharks, or even the cetacean order, which is whales and dolphins. Now, that is important. That is very important. They have the bottom half of either a fish or a whale or a shark or something like that. This means that the lamia / lamia or whatever, that they don't fit into this category. Nor does the naga, which is very similar actually to the lamia, but we'll get to those at another point. And technically also Ursula the Sea Witch does not fall into this category as well in her octopus form. That actually does have its own special name, and we'll talk about them at another point. So this is where I confess to you guys that I spent a good 3 hours trying to figure out what the Linnaean classification for a mermaid would actually be, as she standardly appears in media and literature, only to break down when I realized that, they don't exactly fit into a spot, probably because they are a magical creature, and applying science to magic either kills it or makes you go completely batshit insane. So if you feel like possibly trying to come up with what the possible Linnaean classification would be, feel free to go right on ahead and do that. So the Linnaean classification system is the classic kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. It's sort of in that general thing. Now, I was assuming that they are in the order of Sirenia, which has a few different creatures in it. That's sort of where manatees live, that's where manatees live. That's the category in which manatees are. And I put them there specifically because they have breasts, and can reproduce without eggs, thus making them mammalian, in my mind. Though that is speculation, obviously. The best logical reasoning and breakdown of this will probably win some form of prize, but I have yet to figure out what that prize is going to be. So, break down a kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species for a mermaid, and, come back at me and tell me and explain why. And if I like the answer, I will entirely give you a prize of some kind. Anyway, basically, mermaids have the torso of a woman and the bottom half of a fish. This means no fish heads, no snake bottoms, and no octopodes, not octopus, whatever. No octopus bottoms either. They can be anthropomorphized, which I will, I guess, give an example of possibly in the show notes at some point. But basically, anthropomorphized can be that something is humanoid, but still very much an animal. If you think of, honestly, I hate that I'm about to say this, but you can think of furries, and furries are kind of anthropomorphized animals. So they can be anthropomorphized fish, basically. Or whales, or things of that nature. In any case, most common depictions in art have a pretty clear dividing line between the two halves, as opposed to it being anthropomorphized, which would not have a clear divide. It would sort of just easily blend, and you'd have different features over your entire body pertaining to this particular creature. Okay. Now, the mermaid that was in the little story that I just told you is not your standard depiction of a mermaid, because the monster portion of that story is not the one that we get told most frequently. Certainly, it's one that is coming up a lot more often nowadays. That story that I wrote was inspired by Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which is actually one of my favorite portrayal of mermaids in movies. Honestly, because they are fierce and badass in that movie, and they are beautiful, and they fight, and they use fishing nets to snare their prey like beautiful smart creatures that I love. Anyway, so, and also I just love that movie, even though I know that movie was crappy. Anyway, get at me about that. Whatever. Fine. Don't at me. Anyway, so, the mermaids in those movies are beautiful creatures and ruthless fighters, and they use fish netting to snare their prey and drown them. In this movie, they are portrayed as cannibals? Okay, I guess not technically cannibals, but they eat what they catch. And if what they catch happens to be human, they don't exactly seem to mind that they're eating something that has a very similar upper body to them. One thing that is going to come up a few times during this is the powers that a mermaid has and where those powers come from. So, first of all, in order to accept that mermaids exist, you have to accept that that magic exists. You just sort of have to accept that. And so once you've done that, great. Now you're ready to move on to the second thing, which is that mermaids can shapeshift into humans, which is particularly creepy and annoying, because this could mean that you might not be able to recognize a mermaid when the mermaid appears, which is extra terrifying if you are trying to avoid mermaids for some kind of reason. And honestly, also, in a lot of depictions, they can just do that for themselves. They don't need to go up to, like, a sea witch or whatever, or ask their king/dad in the ocean. And they can just have their own sense of agency, unlike Ariel. But anyway, #shade. In Greek mythology, gods and demigods could shapeshift at will, no matter what they were a god of. So, for example, you can look at Zeus and him raping a whole bunch of people. Oh, ew. Gross. You know what? Let's not think about Zeus. Zeus doesn't need to come up here. You can think about Poseidon, actually, as Poseidon has done that a few times. Though also, Poseidon has also raped a few people. God damn it. Fuck ancient Greek history. Jesus, I can't do it. Anyway. Ha ha ha! Okay, so how do we classify mermaids? Now, I'm not talking about the Linnaean classification. I'm actually, in this specific case, talking about the taxonomical categories, so that when we run into a mermaid in the wild, we know what kind of mermaid it is. Now, from my research, mermaid myths fit into 4 different kinds of categories. And the categories are vanity, siren, monster, and guardian. So the vanity mermaid is just a pretty mermaid. No real powers or anything there. Now, if you're trying to think of, if you're trying to come up with like some kind of examples, the 1954 movie from Disney, Peter Pan, those mermaids there actually are vanity mermaids. Maybe they have a nice voice. That is not always the case. But they are, by and large, just pretty, and pretty all of the time. Famous mermaids that are in this category are Ariel, obviously, Madison from Splash, Miranda from 1948's Miranda, and, oh god, technically Zoolander. Oh, Jesus. Zoolander technically fits in there. Aquamarine from Aquamarine. Cody Griffin from The 13th Year fits into this. The mermaid from Magic Island in 1995. I don't know if you guys remember that movie, but I remember Magic Island, and I remember watching that movie so goddamn much, specifically because there's a mermaid in it. Like, that was the reason that I watched that movie as much as I did. Anyway, moving back. You can also look at the mermaid from the episode of Charmed, at season 5, episode 1 and episode 2. You can also look that one time in 1999 that Sabrina went to Australia and found the last mermaid colony. There was that. That was a fun time. Anyway, so that you get the general picture. They are vain, they are pretty, they're always pretty. Anyway, so the second one is the siren. Now, the siren is is also usually pretty and in some way. But they are predatory. They hunt sailors. They kill sailors. They are the ones that will drown you. That's who they are. That is their life. That is their choice that they have made to, drown you. But anyway, now they have the only power that they really have is the power to sing really well, usually. So the original Peter Pan plays and stories, J.M. Barrie actually stated that it was, dangerous to approach a mermaid lagoon at midnight because they might ensnare you with their song and you also could die. Also, I'm going to make a really shitty joke here that they might catfish you. Ha 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 ha. I'm so sorry. I'll leave now. Anyway, so we're gonna move right on past that. Now, the monster is pretty straightforward. Basically, they're like the siren, except not like the siren. They will eat you. They will eat you. They will eat you. They will kill you. They are not pretty. These ones are not even shapeshifters. They just are not. They are just monsters. They are markedly less human than their other counterparts. I would count the mermaids from Pirates of the Caribbean in the siren category, but also the mermaids from Pirates of the Caribbean would fit into the monster category because they do drown people and eat them as well. Now, the mermaid from She Creature, I don't know if you remember that, but that one, the mermaid from She Creature is a monster for sure. Now, there is a mermaid from a short version of The Little Mermaid that I'm going to link in the show notes because honestly it's fascinating, but it's a little short that someone made for a film class, and it's crazy to me, but it's awesome. And that is a monster if ever I saw one. A monster type mermaid if ever I saw one. Though, like I said, also, the Pirates of the Caribbean mermaids fit into this next category, which is the Guardian. Now, the Guardian, I actually would say, are the most dangerous ones because they are the ones that are on a mission. They are not violent, per se. They are violent, actually, but they're not hungry, and they're doing it not because they want to eat you, but they are doing it because they have something to protect, and if you are encroaching on that, woe to you, because honey, they will get you. They will get you. Anyway, they only exist to make sure that you stay away from either their area specifically or some form of treasure. Thinking Pirates of the Caribbean, they exist to keep you away from the Fountain of Youth. That is what they're there for. Or that's rather what they're there to prevent from happening. So, you can also think of the mermaids from Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Those mermaids, they're guarding... Well, I mean, granted, they're playing a role in the games, but they're guarding someone in the game. That's sort of what they're doing. That's their job. So, they always freaked me the hell out, actually. I don't know if they freaked anyone else out, but they definitely freaked me out. But anyway, so I'm going to actually wrap this episode up right there. So, if you want to hear me do more of these, then let me know. But I want to say a big thank you to CK, aka Classic Kevin, because Classic Kevin is the host of Mirth and Monsters, which I love. It's one of my favorite shows to listen to. It's a fast show, which I really like. I do like shows that are on the quicker side to get through, but this was honestly this particular little in the mix segment was inspired by CK. It was inspired by CK and encouraged by CK when I sent him a message. Now, I thoroughly appreciate myths and legends and all of those things. So I hope to do this more often because I do really just like talking about these amazing creatures. So if you guys want to hear me do more of that, then let me know. Let me know if you enjoyed this part. Message me on Twitter and tell me about it. Now, if you came here, and the whole reason that you came here was to hear the second half of my conversation with Mr. Scott Thrower, then guess what? You're in luck! That part of the conversation is happening right about now. 15. Okay, so transitioning to D&D, because I enjoy D&D rather a lot. I'm new to it, actually, as of last... I guess it wasn't this past summer, but it was the summer before that I met the team that I was with for a while until, like, this past winter when everyone ran out of time. Or actually, no, I guess, when was it? Nope, it was summer. So we stopped like at summer this year because we all they all got jobs and I didn't have time anymore. Okay. Yeah, anyway.
So your pathway into D&D was you met some people who were into it and then they were like, "Hey, have you heard of this Dungeons and this Dragons?"
My path was more of I've wanted to play D&D for years. Like, for actual years. Like, since I was 10. And nobody ever... So wanting to play D&D is one thing. Knowing other people to play it with is an entirely different thing. And I did not know
finding the right people is so important.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't find those people until a lot more recently. And, like, the fun thing, most of my... Actually, all of my D&D team is in my audio drama. Every single one of them. Yeah, like, every single one of them was like, we're going to do voice acting because we all love Critical Role. And of course, and it made sense. And they're good at it. So, hey, here we are.
I gave up on Critical Role about 6 months ago, but until then, I was just diehard fan.
It seems like it's really great, but the episodes are really long, and they're
really long.
Funny so coming long. From me, but like they're really long, and I just can't. I don't have the time.
I was so happy when they started releasing them as a podcast. I don't know if they've kept doing that, but
they
again,
have.
I don't have time to listen to many podcasts anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a good move because sitting and watching a YouTube for that amount of time is so much harder than listening to a podcast for that amount of time.
Absolutely. It was a great move, but for some reason they were releasing them all on the same day.
Gotcha.
So it was like 20 episodes would drop on one day.
Yeah, that's a little much.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a problem. But I guess the goal is to so you can just check back when these are up and like download them at your leisure. But I had them set up to automatically download, and that led to a couple overage charges that I am not pleased with. It's just got a little
download
weird
over Wi-Fi, man.
Well, yeah, it was one of those moments where, like, this actually happened the other day because there's a show called Gayish that I really like a lot. I've only just now started to get into, like, let me look up queer podcasts from queer people about queer things. Yes, let me do that thing. I haven't reached that point yet. Yeah, it's an interesting point to reach. I mean, I've done it before, but what tends to happen is I get let down because normally they're hosted by white gay guys that then let me down horribly. But anyway, in some way, shape, or form, which...
I apologize on our behalf.
You're fine. Don't worry about it. But so far that hasn't happened with this recent one. But like, I got my haircut yesterday, and I was up near where I live now. I'm on the border of New York and Connecticut. They're just both right next to me. I could, if I drive for 5 minutes in either, like, maybe 10 minutes south, I'll be in Connecticut. If I drive for 10 minutes west, I'm sorry, it's west. If I drive for 10 minutes west, I'll be in New York State.
Okay.
Yeah, so, like, I'm really close to there. But if I travel up about an hour and 15 minutes, I'll be in Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, this show released an episode of, like, we don't have any listeners in Vermont. So I drove up to Vermont, because I drive an hour to get my hair cut anyway, because I'm black and I have a barber, and you don't divorce your barber. So I had to go back to that barber, and he's an hour away. So I went up to go see him, and then was like, fuck it, I'll just head on over and go into Vermont and just download a couple of their episodes so they have some downloads from Vermont. So I did that, but in order to do that, I had to not be on Wi-Fi for a brief amount of time. But yeah, so most of the time, I only download over Wi-Fi, but if I'm on a road trip, Also, I'm never on a road trip. But if in moments like that, like where I'm like, I'm out, but there's a show that released an episode 5 minutes ago, and I want to listen to it right now, I will then update and just deal with the data things. But Critical Role dropping 40 episodes at once, well, 20 episodes at once, not 40.
Yeah, that's a little much.
It's way too goddamn much, and I just could not handle it. But it's all good. They're a good show. I like them a lot. But my friends finally invited me to a D&D game and have been slowly teaching me how to play, which is really fun. But which is why I'm glad that I have subscribed to the other one, just because hearing other people's games makes me a better player is ultimately what I've realized. So
yeah, and Critical Role has done wonders for Dungeons and Dragons. It's like the new edition has just opened up to a point that a lot of extra people are now playing, and I think Critical Role and being able to see what good D&D looks like is one of those big changes, because previously we never really got that. We never had like this aspiration to apply to. We just had whoever we played with in high school. That's what D&D was. Yeah,
which is fascinating, because people modify things and get all crazy with their gaming, and I love it. I love it.
And there are a lot of bad game masters out there. I mean,
haven't encountered one yet, but I mean,
you're very lucky.
I've encountered I've encountered like 3 so far, like in the games that I've played. So the first time it was my friend Dane. Shout out to Dane. And his campaign was really fun, and I did terrible things to people, but it was really quite fun. I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to be any of what I was trying to be there, but I had a good time. There might have been a moment at which I used shape water to make porn in front of a nun. That was a thing that happened. Yeah.
Okay.
Creative uses of magic. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun times. And also pantsed a night. That was not a good idea. Using magic, of course, so he wouldn't know it was me, but he knew it was me. But he knew it was me. Of course he knew it was me. Anyway, so I had a really good time with that. Then we broke from that for a bit to do a vampire game, which was fun, but that was led by Simon, shout out to Simon, awesome Simon. And then I did a couple one-shots with this guy whose name I'm forgetting, but he's a really cool dude, and the games were really fun. Those were really good. The one-shots were really great for like a trial run of like, okay, cool. I now have to figure all of this out in a very short amount of time so that we can run this thing in like 3 hours and then be done with the story in 3 hours. This is wonderful. Oh my god, I love it. Have you listened to God damn it. Why did I just forget the name of the... Oh, the show is literally called One Shot, and I genuinely just forgot that the show was called One Shot. But it's... I love One Shot as a podcast because it is one of those ones that shows you all of the different games that people are making that are not necessarily the that are D&D adjacent, but not necessarily the same thing. And I find those to be really fascinating. Yes, 30.
No,
okay. Mm-hmm.
No, I've never listened to that one. I have. At the moment, I'm not listening to much in the way of RPG shows just because of the things that I could cut. That was the first one where I was like, we can get rid of all of that. Mm-hmm. There's some good stuff going on, but it's such a crowded field. Like I noticed that when I wasn't originally on Caverns and Comedians. I joined in episode 4. And the reason I joined was the people who started the show were actually from my Thursday night D&D game.
Oh.
I've been dungeon mastering a Thursday night game for a couple of years now, and since I was big in the improv world here in Toronto, some of the players were improvisers, and they found it neat the fact that improvisers play D&D in a different way than a lot of other people.
I've noticed that.
Yeah, so they decided to start a show just using improvisers to see what would happen with it. Yeah. So as soon as they lost a player, they were like, hey, what if we brought our dungeon master from these Thursday games in? And that's how I became an elderly paladin gnome who has the memory of a goldfish and the libido of a 16-year-old.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
It's a very fun combination to play.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah. That is amazing.
The problem is... he thinks he's much more attractive than anyone else thinks he is, but he doesn't remember the rejections because he has a terrible memory.
Oh, he is a gnome. I figured
yes.
He wasn't attractive. That's mean. But like,
yes, that's a little racist against gnomes.
As a species, they're not really set up for the whatever. That's fine. But also,
he's also not set up to be a paladin. Having a paladin who is around 3 feet tall is a very difficult combination. I went into it trying to think of the weirdest combination I possibly could, and I love Fook Wimble so much.
That is, oh my god, I can't wait to start actually listening, because that is so funny. And you're right, that is not I neglected to think about that as a fact there. Like, oh, that is an interesting choice.
Well, and he also provides a great entry for the audience because the fact that he never remembers anything is a way of reinforcing plot points for the audience.
Oh, that is a really great point. Ooh, that is a great point.
Because his entire memory is just what he has written on the inside of his shield. If he is ever separated from that shield, he doesn't remember a damn thing.
Oh, God.
Even the people who are in the party with him. He's built his relationships on this shield.
That is really... Ooh! Oh, the poor thing.
The poor little guy. But yeah.
So
and he's got a tragedy. The one thing he can remember is that his entire family was murdered by a sorceress.
Oh, no.
That's the only permanent memory he has.
Oh, that's
so he's
sad.
Tragic, he's hilarious, and he's gonna try and sleep with you.
Hilarious. I love it. I love that so much.
Which, unfortunately, with what's going on in Hollywood right now, maybe doesn't ring as nicely as it did when I originally created the character.
I mean, but, Hollywood is just... I was talking to him earlier, I think it was literally this morning, and I was talking to him about how I was reacting to George Takei. And that allegation from Thursday.
Oh, I did not hear that one.
Okay, so here's the thing about that allegation. So far, the allegation has basically just been one dude came forward and said that, this one time back in the 80s, George Takei got a little handsy after I'd been drinking, but it was a whole thing. But when I was reading through the actual article wherein the guy was talking to that person, I was reading through it and I was like, this, given that this was the 80s and understanding gay culture from the 80s, this does not sound necessarily like it was assault. It sounds a lot more like it sounds more like a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Than assault. But I also literally just put out an 1.5 hour long episode of me talking about sexual assault and talking about the fact that, like, when a victim comes forward, start by believing them and continue to do so unless evidence proves to the contrary, which normally it doesn't wind up doing, but...
Well, and that's also the tricky part about the media, because the media... We often see these big explosive things, but we never really pay attention when the media backtracks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then they also try to not publicize when they backtrack, I saw this thing on Twitter. When a media outfit backtracks, they rarely post that backtracking to Twitter.
Yeah, it's usually in small print hidden on a page.
Exactly. So, like, it's just... Yeah, but he responded this morning with I've been racking my brain trying to remember this dude and see if I remember him from the 80s, since he apparently claimed that we were friends for a really long period of time. I don't think I know this man, but George Takei also, like, in the with his responses to Kevin Spacey, and how adamant he was in his responses to Kevin Spacey, I didn't think that someone like that would do something like that. But also, even the description of the case itself, he didn't, he stopped when he was told to stop, which is honestly better than most of the cases we've been hearing about. And, there was no weird power play thing. Like, this wasn't a person he was working with or a person he'd hired or whatever.
Yeah.
It was a person that was, going through a rough time in a relationship that he was trying to help out. If we're believing what the victim has said, that was the relationship that they had at that point. And it just didn't strike me as it struck me as you got blackout drunk and might have pissed yourself, and he was attempting to remove your piss-stained pants. Is quite literally what the situation sounded like to me, but those words weren't necessarily said in that case. So, I don't, but he did say that he got incredibly drunk after a few drinks and sort of came to, and his pants were down, and that was really it. And then he said stop, and then George was like, sorry, I'm just trying to make you more comfortable because you're really drunk and shouldn't be driving, so I figured you would stay here.
Yeah.
I was fair. All of those are fair things at that point. And also, I've 1,000%, well, first and foremost, I've had that happen to me before, where I did get super drunk and then had to stay somewhere and may or may not have, whatever. There were reasons that I wasn't wearing clothes that next day, and they had nothing to do with being assaulted. Or they had nothing to do with sex at all. It literally was, the party I was at was a foam party.
Okay.
So, my clothes were actually just wet. So,
yeah.
I don't want to sleep in wet clothes, so the wet clothes came off. But I couldn't have done that on my own at the time. Someone else had to help me with that. So, that part of it makes sense to me.
Yeah, we're currently in the woods about
yeah.
what we believe and what we don't believe, and who is a trustworthy source and who isn't, and who might be stepping forward just to get their name in the press, and who is actually a really terrible dude. Yeah. I mean, there's so much gray area out there that it's hard to make anything out of anything. Yeah. I'm just glad that it's finally being spoken about.
Agreed.
There are a lot of monsters who are being unmasked at the moment. Are there some people who aren't monsters also being unmasked? Yeah, probably that's going to happen.
It is.
That's probably going to happen here and there.
It is. There are just certain people where I'm this person is a queer luminary, and I would like for them to not be dragged through the mud just because someone wanted, because somebody wanted attention. Yeah. And I'm not even saying that this person is doing that. I think Like, I could see, I still say, I believe that this probably happened. I just believe that it was probably a misunderstanding and not that this person was assaulted. But if this person feels like they were and has been living with the feeling that they were, then at that point I'm like, well, then that's the most important part of this. And I hope that somehow you can come to a source of healing at that moment between the two of them.
We out in the world can't make these decisions because we're just hearing these stories. We have to leave it to someone to investigate.
Precisely.
Because if we just make a decision, like for the longest time, we were ignoring these stories about Bill Cosby because, hey, he's Bill Cosby.
And people still
you need someone actually, you need someone in the situation to be able to look into it, someone to investigate it. We can't tar and feather everyone just because an allegation or two come forward. Yes, when it's a couple of dozen people or 7 or 8 people, then I'm more likely to be like, that's a bad dude.
Yeah.
If it's 1 or 2, I really, unfortunately, have to suspend my disbelief and be like, I don't know what's happening in this situation. And I can't make a decision.
And that's the other thing here, is so far it's only been 1 dude. So I'm like, because it's 1 dude, it doesn't, like, because, sexual assault honestly, sexual assault is a pattern of behavior. Like, it's never that it happened just one time. It's that it's happened more than once to multiple people, especially if it's gone, like, between the 80s and now, if it didn't happen, like, if it only happened that one time in the 80s and no one else comes forward, then I'm gonna have to err on the side of, I'm pretty sure that one, either maybe that situation happened, but maybe it was just a misunderstanding and they can work this out on their own. And honestly, the only thing I can do is wait and see if more people come forward. If a bunch of people start coming forward and they're like, yeah, George Takei ain't shit, then sure, I will be right here and I will be very quick to say, like, well, there goes George Takei. We lost one, which would be shitty. But like I don't have another option at that point. But anyway,
I mean, there are people out in the world who will admit to having caused a lot of murders. Just even though they're not the murderer, they'll still say, "Hey, yeah, I murdered all these people," even though they're not the murderer. Until the evidence is there, innocent until proven guilty, I guess.
Yeah,
but
that's that's a great.
A lot of these
too.
things can't be proved in court. Like in this George Takei situation, this guy's probably never going to be able to get a court to look into this as a serious allegation, unfortunately. So yeah, George Takei might be a bad guy, might not. I have no way of knowing, and that's the uncomfortable place where we are because we have no way of knowing in a lot of these cases.
Right, and even with that, it's like, well, even if we could know in some way, shape, or form, like, at this point, it seems like the reason for coming forward would be to charge someone in the court of public opinion, as opposed to...
Which is a terrible court.
Exactly, because it is often wrong and makes very rash judgments very quickly.
Yeah, this is how women got hung as witches or burned as witches. Yeah, it's...
Preach. Oh my God, because that statement very specifically. And also, too, this is the other thing that is always complicated with me about people coming forward with these allegations, is that, lest we forget that there was a white woman who did this to a black man, and he was hung, like he was hanged for that, and she, on her deathbed, literally said, oh yeah, I made that whole thing up and that never happened.
Yeah.
Like that is entirely a thing that not only, it didn't just happen that one time. That happens all of the time. I even had a situation involving my sister earlier this year, where my sister, like, she went into a store. My sister's 13 years old. She went into a store with her friends, and they were there for 3 minutes and then left because nothing in the store was cute. And she, like, this woman, about like an hour later, who happened to be the owner of the store, comes driving down the center road of the like the central road, finds before she even finds my sister, she finds a former student of mine who's one of the only other, like, young black girls in town, stops her and starts yelling at her, accusing her of stealing. She had never been in her store. So there's that. And she was like, I appreciate that, child, because she was like, bitch, I don't know you. Who the fuck you think you... Why you running all up on me? Shit. Girl, you don't know me. You better back the hell up. And I love her so much because that child has attitude. I love her. She's amazing. But my sister, like, she did the same thing to my sister. And my sister, like, my sister's 13. Regardless of whether or not my sister did that, which she didn't, just to clarify, she didn't. But if she had stolen something from the store, you confront her parents. You don't confront the 13-year-old in public. Crazy lady. Like, you just don't do that. Like, so I then go and I post a thing, like a review on her store's page, which is a fairly standard thing to do, saying, like, see, first and foremost, what you're not going to do is you're not going to go around accusing my younger sister of being a thief. Like, you're just not going to do that. One, because you have no business talking to a 13-year-old child in public like that, using profanity and yelling at them in the middle of the street. You have no business doing that. And if you do that again, we're calling the police and charges will be filed, and you, like, we will take legal action if you do this again, literally ever. And that, like, literally that was the post. Very general. There was no threat in there other than, don't approach my little sister because we will sue you. Which is a very fair thing.
Yep.
This woman called the police saying that I had threatened her, listed my address, which there's no way that she could have gotten that. She could not have gotten my address. There's no way. It's not posted anywhere. So the cops show up to my house and are like, hey, we got a report that you threatened someone on the internet. And I was like, and this also, I should mention that this is a white woman who called the police on me, knowing what happens to young black men in America on a daily basis here, which is that calling the police can wind up very quickly becoming a death sentence for literally any one of us. So knowing that, she still called because she, quote-unquote, felt threatened because I told her not to talk to a tiny child. Like, for me, defending my family apparently becomes like a potential death sentence because she is afraid.
Yeah.
Like, that's a thing that is so, like, and it's that same mindset that does wind up ruining lives and careers because someone came forward with this thing and there was a misunderstanding about it or like whatever. And I could understand in this particular case with all of, like, I'm an assault survivor. I understand what it feels like to not have, like, to be seeking that justice and to be seeking people listening and actually taking you seriously, for them to not do that and for them to suddenly just not do that. Like, so I'm never one to be like, I don't believe this, that this isn't possible, this couldn't have been the way that this went down. Well, but in this particular case, I'm like, I don't fucking know. It's one time with one person.
And it's shitty because a lot of people are like, how do you expect someone to come forward with these allegations if we're not going to immediately believe them and we're going to distrust them and be like, yeah, that's a terrible situation to be in. If you're coming forward with a real allegation, for people not to believe you is the worst. Mm-hmm. But we have no way of knowing who's telling the truth at any given time. We have to wait for that investigation. We have to trust the people who investigate these sorts of things know what they're doing. Because otherwise, yeah, we're just burning witches.
Exactly. There's a woman in who I think she still lives in my town. She, like, when we were in high school, there was a day that, this day is honestly one of the only days in my entire life that I've blacked out due to rage, because of what happened. Like, she asked me and her, at that point, ex-boyfriend to drive her, we picked her up from the mall, we hung out with her for a few hours, and then she had us drive her to the police station to say that a person who we had not seen all day, who we hadn't seen for like 2 months because he wasn't even in town, to accuse him of sexually assaulting her earlier that day.
Oy.
He wasn't even in the state. Like, he wasn't around, and she was with us the whole day. And she expected us to back her up and be her witnesses. Which obviously...
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's moments like that that make me like, no. Like, I mean, has she probably been assaulted in her life? Yeah, to be completely honest, yes, she has. And I honestly, if it were any other time, I would have just been like, shit, what can I do to help? But that specific time, I'm like, I know this is a lie, and... Yep. Because I know this is a lie, I then have to call into question every other time because of that lie and how easily she told that lie and how quickly it came up. And most women I don't think would ever do that. I do think she was mentally disturbed, and that was why that happened. But that was really but that still that brings up the question of how do I know? How will I know? Anyway, that's...
Still, I'm glad that these monsters are being unmasked. I mean, Kevin Spacey, there have been stories about him in the wind for a long time. I hang out with a lot of improvisers and therefore actors, so the stories have been there. The fact that it's now being discussed, amazing. And I hope, we're just scratching the surface. I hope a lot more of them get unmasked.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
But, yeah, it's a weird gray area with a lot of these.
It's also interesting to now think, fuck, that I never want to be in Hollywood. That dream that was there for so many children, that's still there for a lot of children, is a dream that we are realizing now is oh, fuck, this, maybe not. Maybe let's not do that.
Let's not be innocents. This isn't just Hollywood. Hollywood's just the one that's making the papers.
Exactly. But the fact that it was covered up in Hollywood for so long and now is being uncovered, it's one of those fuck, well, you have now ruined my childhood dream. Yeah. Which, I mean, well, my childhood dream was not to be an actor, actually, to be entirely legit. I may be acting now. It was not the fucking plan. That was never... this was never the plan. Broadcasting also was never a plan.
But I'm hoping seeing some of these guys brought down is going to empower people to bring out these monsters in other parts of the world. I mean, it's a conversation that is long overdue, a conversation that should be happening, and I'm glad it's happening. I'm hoping it really make some change because there are a lot of monsters out there. Agreed.
And I think that's the best thing that we could hope to get out of that. And you know what, actually, though, speaking of monsters, I have my third question, which involves a monster.
Oh, I thought you were about to segue back to Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, how are you going to do this?
I thought about that, but I thought about that, and
now that we're talking about monsters,
that will be
kobolds.
That will be question 3.5. However, question 3. This is one of those questions. I want to see if you can guess where I got this question from. I feel like you will. So, you have to face a giant lava monster of evil and darkness. And you can do so. The weapon you have to do so is your happiest memory. So, yep, a moment of pure joy and happiness and whatever that feeling of light is. You have that, and upon using that, what will happen is the evil devil creature will turn into a not evil devil creature and turn back into the thing it was before. Anyway, so, given all of that, what is that memory?
Jeez, I've got a terrible memory, so I just know that I'm going to be overlooking some amazing ones. I mean, there
I
are
suppose
times where it's just like when something I've done gets recognized, like the podcast actually taking off after years of my writing just not being a thing, suddenly seeing people respond to it and respond to it well. But this is probably actually just going to go back to a memory of my dog. Oh, I love that dog so much. His name was Baxter. He was 16 and a bit when he died, so we had a lot of long years together.
Mm-hmm.
He was my world. Yeah, and there's still just this big opening where I'm like, I still don't know what to do with myself, because like being a single owner of a dog in Toronto, so it's not like just open the back door and let the dog out, but my day was structured around walking the dog. Mm-hmm. Suddenly having that structure disappear was like everything changed.
It was, yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. But like the memory of the happy times of that does really.
Oh yeah, there were so many happy times with that dog because he was an amazing little dude. Mm-hmm. I still remember two things from when I first got him, because I was trying to figure out his name. I wanted it to be something pretentious and vaguely British, so it was between Baxter and Spencer. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh wow. Oh, the fact that you just said Spencer. Okay, so here's fun little thing. My middle name officially, like on legal documents and things, is Spencer. So that's funny to me.
Yeah. Well, it was between those two names, and then I was walking him in one of the first days that I had him, and I walked past Baxter Street, and that just decided it.
Oh, well,
so that was done. But there's still, like, I remember that first walk home with him, and the buildings we passed. I remember all of that. It's just because finally getting a dog and this gorgeous little beige thing that was bounding around beside me, it was probably the best day of my life.
Oh man, I'm going to somehow post a photo because I also now I'm about to be weepy, and damn it.
Yeah, I'm resisting the urge on my end too.
Because he's so adorable. Oh, man. What breed of dog was he?
We think he was a cockapoo, but we don't know. He was a stray, so somewhere in Toronto he'd just been wandering the streets for a while. They thought he was aggressive, so they wouldn't even do basic grooming on him at the Humane Society. So he had an eye infection, and his eye was just caked with grossness. They wouldn't take him out of the cage because they thought he was aggressive. He was a little aggressive. I had to train that out of him. But as soon as he was away from the other dogs, it was mostly just fear. And he became just a different dog as soon as I got him out of the Humane Society.
Given how tiny he was, that actually makes a lot of sense. Because like I find that tiny dogs are like little fear machines.
Yeah. Well, and his entire life, he was a nervous guy.
Oh.
He was just a nervous little dude. So he was always like right by my side. I accidentally made him afraid of thunder, and I felt bad about that for the rest of his life. Because he wasn't afraid of thunder, and then I took him out on Canada Day one day, and we were too close to a cannon salute.
Oh.
And after that, thunder just terrified him.
Poor little thing.
Yeah, I've got so many dog stories.
Oh. Well, hey, the lava monster has been defeated. Like that the lava monster went down, and the lovely green island lady is smiling. So I'm guessing that you figured out probably where I got that question from.
I didn't actually.
Oh really? Oh okay. I got it from Moana.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So got it from Moana. I had a breakup earlier this year, and that song was the thing that got me through it. Or rather, the song that is that moment in the movie is what got me through that breakup, which is real weird. And it also got me through something a few weeks ago, actually. And led me to a really interesting realization, which as a storyteller, I think you'll probably appreciate, which is that, like, the only real things that we can definitively know are true and exist in this world actually is anything that is made of nature. That is quite literally just nature. So, like, I'm talking trees, rocks, rivers, and even rivers are a little touch and go because we can man-make those as well. But, like, anything that is not made by man is the only thing that we can technically realize isn't lying to us. Or trying to make us believe something that isn't necessarily what it is.
That is... I should mention right now that I took a philosophy course in first year university and I hated it. Hated it so much. I'm a very efficient, pragmatic sort of person. So I have no idea what to make of that because
that's fair.
I don't tend to think on that level. I don't know what to make of that.
That's fair. Maybe I will later explain the piece of the thing. Like, there's a piece of that, though, that also, like, I didn't tell you just then, but, like, a piece of, like, basically, the summation of that is that I got betrayed by somebody, and it was really, like, and I had basically had to realize that they'd been lying to me for a minimum of 3 weeks, but most likely a full entire year.
Jeez.
Yeah, and it was, like, and it was a lot. It was a whole lot to just suddenly have to deal with. But
how do you trust someone after that?
Precisely. So you see why I was like, I will place my trust in trees. They cannot lie to me. See, it was genuinely. I became a druid, and I think that will be the next D&D character that I play. And bam, look at that transition into D&D from that.
Oh, we're back
again. Yeah, right. See, this is what I do. What is okay, so two things. Two questions. One, what is your favorite so I guess we'll go with 5. We'll go with the most recent one. What is your favorite possible monster that appears in 5 or in 5th edition, and what is your favorite race that isn't one of the standard races?
Okay. Well, when I do D&D, when I'm a dungeon master, most of our enemies are humans or like other playable character races, because I find them much more fascinating and easier to fit into the world than bringing a monster directly in. Because I find monsters are like, because most of mine are city based, they're heavily role playing based instead of hack and slash. So because like a lot of my friends are improvisers and actors and so forth, so we veer towards, like, sometimes we don't have a single combat in a session, and it's all just talking and laughing and interpersonal relationships between characters and figuring out whether you trust someone or anything. So my favorite monsters are actually playable character races.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually like that a lot. And I honestly hold on, this 1 second. Sound from dance. There was a dance class that was happening, and it just let out, and they're right outside my door. But so, like, I don't know if you can hear them a lot, but I'm just sort of making a little note on my thing, like, okay, so sound during this portion, cut my own sound.
I can hear them.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. Sound from general team. Yeah. Anyway, but that's yeah, they are okay. So that I like that a lot. The thing that makes it that even more interesting... Well, actually, okay, I'll say this. I always found those sessions to be a little frustrating. I love them. They're wonderful for character development, but I always found them frustrating when they happened a lot. Where, like, we could go a full session without a battle because I also wanted to level up, and I wanted to level up, and it's hard to do that when all I'm doing is
DM. When I DM, your leveling up is not based on monsters at all.
Oh, okay.
Like, experience points don't enter into it.
That is That's goddamn magical. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
You just hit part of the story where everyone levels up, and everyone levels up as a team together at the same time.
Oh, that is so dope and would have made so much more goddamn sense. I mean, no offense, Dane. No offense, Dane. But I like that a lot. If I didn't have to worry about that as much, I don't know that I would have... I think that would have been almost an easier way of building... An easier way of, like, thinking about the character in a more deep way. Like, actually being able to figure out what his full story actually is. And I
love that sort of thing
story.
because I'm building, like when people create characters for my stories, they also give me a list of people they'll know in the city. So I've got a list of at least 3 people that they know that they're going to be hanging out with. And I get a sense of what their story is that they want to develop for their character so that I can sew that into the threads of the overall story.
Nice. Okay.
Because like with D&D, it's what you encourage is what you're going to get. So if you're encouraging that for people to level up, they need experience points from killing monsters, that is how people are going to work. It's sort of like also if you give your raises based on who can bring in the most new clients, then people are going to stop worrying about their existing clients because you're just giving them increases based on new clients.
That's a great point.
You've got to encourage what you want to see from your players. And you've got to find the right players. Like, I mean, early on in my sessions, we had a number of people who came for a session or two and then decided it wasn't for them and left.
Gotcha. See, that makes sense. Like we had 2 players who came in. First of all, they were both really great. One of them just got deployed to Afghanistan, though, so he couldn't stay for super long.
It's a pretty decent reason.
Yeah, I'm like,
that's excuses go.
I'm like, yeah, we got you. That makes sense. Yeah. Hopefully, when he comes back, maybe that'll encourage everyone to find a new day and we'll play again, because I miss them a lot. But like, oh man, that makes a lot of sense. And oh no, I just wish I had you as a dungeon master now. Because like that, well, yeah.
It's also interesting because Kyle, who is our DM for Caverns and Comedians, he's a very different dungeon master than I am. There are so many things that I would do differently, but he's building a story in his own way, and it's fascinating to watch that. That's also why there are certain D&D podcasts that I'm more likely to be into than others, just because DMs are so unique in the way they approach things.
Definitely. Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I have noticed that I haven't been in many games, but I have noticed that there is a difference and the difference in who is DMing is an important thing to notice, and I do is an important thing to know. What the fuck? Words are weird, and I'm like not great at them today. Like, I don't know what's happening. It's upsetting that I'm not great at words today, because I also, after this, have to record like all of the narration for like multiple episodes of the audio drama, which I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do that if I can't speak.
With booze in my hand, I should be the one who's having trouble with words. I
will be drinking later. I would have been drinking. I mean, not I would have been drinking now, obviously, because I'm at work, but, no, I would have been, I normally, like, if this were during the evening, I would definitely have a drink, and I am mad because they're, like, having, like, they're quite literally just, like, having a party outside of my door, and there's a sign on my door that says I'm recording, but anyway, we'll just leave that alone, because, I mean, at the same time, I am still at work, and it's whatever, but, like,
yeah.
Whatever. They're getting ready for a dance show, which is actually going to be really great. The dance program at the school is really cool. I love all of the dancers and all of the teachers too, that teach the dance. They're really great. But anyway, so that's okay, cool. So,
I think I only answered one of your 2 D&D questions, and I've forgotten what the other one was entirely.
The second was, what is your favorite... what would be your favorite race, like, your favorite playable race that isn't one of the standard few? Oh my god, wow. Hold on, I was just pause for, like, half a second. This is getting, like... This got, like, really rowdy, and they're, like, directly in front of my door. But, like, okay. I mean, the other option is I can just move a little closer to the mic so that this is not as much of an issue. Okay, cool. Here we are. And that's what I shall do for now. Hopefully it's not super loud for you there, but we will see. Anyway, so like your favorite playable races that aren't the standard ones, like human, elf, half elf, and I'm trying to think, like the standard ones that haven't changed in years, that just haven't been.
See,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a player, I always go for one of the standard ones.
Okay.
Because I like my fantasy in a certain way. I had a DM recently who was big into anime, and he was playing a very anime-influenced thing where, like, we had a ship that was powered by cola, and one of the players was actually powered by cola too. And it wasn't Dungeons and Dragons for me because it was just weird and different, and I like my classics.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
I also like there are a lot of people in Dungeons and Dragons groups who get frustrated because D&D 5e hasn't released a huge number of extra races and hasn't given them the huge number of extra classes that previous versions of Dungeons and Dragons used to do. They used to give you book after book after book of all these different choices, and Pathfinder does the same thing where there are so many options out there. Whereas I don't find myself constrained by the options that exist because for me, what I'm building is a personality with a history. I'm building like a person. My writer instinct is kicking in, and I'm trying to develop this character. So being constricted by their race or their class isn't as much as an issue for me, because my attention is always on how do they react in certain situations, what's funny about them in this situation, what are they trying to work towards, and that's where the interest is to me.
That makes a lot of sense. I find that the first character I ever played was what was he? He was a Triton.
Okay.
So I guess one of the not quite standard options to play as, but I found that to be fun for me because it was in large part a lot of improvisation for me in a way that I had never done before. Even before that, I'd acted in one thing before that, and that was a piece in which I wound up dying, but I was also a comedian during the thing. Weird. Anyway,
okay.
It was a piece about clothing, wherein I played a son, and I was actually playing opposite my actual mother. And it was literally almost based on a conversation it could have been based on a conversation we'd actually had before, but it was actually more about Trayvon Martin and that whole thing, and how like him wearing a hoodie versus him wearing a suit, at the end of the day it wouldn't have changed anything. Is the ultimate point. So, like, that's the conversation that me and my mom were having, but I took a comedic approach to all of my responses to her in a loving, like, son way, being very, like, sarcastic, in a way that, like, honestly, I know my mom would be fine with and that she would laugh at, and that she was laughing at. So, like, in terms of acting for me, comedy's a thing that I know that I can do. It's a thing that I've apparently just good comedic timing that I don't think about, that just sort of happens, which is yay. I'm glad that I have that. That is a lovely skill to just have.
A lot of people don't have that.
Oh God, no. Because I've seen someone else do that role now and had to coach someone in doing that role and realizing that they did not have that as a skill while doing that role. It landed... Like, it struck the audience when my character died, when I played the character, because I was so funny up to that point, and then it was sudden. It was a very sudden thing of like, oh shit, he's dead. Oh fuck. And now we have to listen to a literal mother talk about her child dying. Fuck, this got real serious real fast. But, like, it still had that levity in it. So, like, they were able to... I don't know. It was interesting. But anyway, so that's besides the point. But that was... So, having to improvise for the first time with that character, and also knowing that we are in a universe wherein how people speak is an interesting thing that is kind of amorphous.
Yeah.
Like... tone, for example. Like, like, tones and wording was a thing that I could play with because it's not something necessarily in any of these universes that's set just on its own. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed getting to play around with that because I basically made it that the Triton was from Harlem. And so the Triton was a gay guy from Harlem, and it was real fun. Which was how just kind of a sea gangsta, which is kind of fun. But anyway, like not even gangsta, because I was just a wandering sorcerer. But whatever, it's fine.
Well, to connect this back to fairy tales, I find I'm interested in the same thing because I'm entering into these stories in a world that we all kind of understand the rules of what fairy tales are, and then I'm playing within those. I like playing within those constraints and seeing what can happen. It's the same with how I like to approach D&D characters and how I'm approaching fairy tales. I seem to like having those constraints. Like poetry. Poetry used to have very strict rules for each different style of poetry, and yet we got hundreds and hundreds of years of really amazing poems.
Oh, yeah.
And then some people wanted to open it up, and so rhyme disappeared, and these formats disappeared, and suddenly poetry just became whatever you wanted it to be. But there's still some fun in playing with those rules.
The best
and finding ways to be creative within those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and also rebuilding the rule. Well, specifically with poetry, rebuilding the rules. So, like, finding a structure and being like, I like this structure, I like this pattern, I like the kind of poem this is. I'm tweaking it a little bit or rewriting the rules based on these rules. This poem will follow this structure, and you'll be able to track the structure. It's very clear, but it's not the same structure as what this one was. I loved that. Oh, God, I used to write poetry all the time. And all the best poems that I ever wrote were hella structured with the original rules of that specific kind of structure.
Oh, all of my poems were complete shit. But people online who say that, like, I'm getting tired of D&D because it's the same character classes and the same races. Even so, you could play so many billions of sorts of characters with those few races and few character classes. Because not all elves are the same. Yeah. Not all clerics are the same. You're being limited by your imagination if you're getting tired of it, not by the rules.
Yeah, like it's a completely different experience in the game if you are say, for example, a paladin gnome versus a elf thief. Elf thief. There we go. That's what
an elven I could thief, play 6 different paladin gnomes, and they'd all be completely different.
Oh yeah, especially because the what was that other thing? It was I guess it really it wasn't. No. It wasn't class, because that class is the thing that class would be the fact that it was it's a paladin.
So you've got class, you've got race, you've got background.
That was the thing I was looking for there. See, because I actually played 2 different Tritons, because I did like 2 weeks of the first Triton and really realized that I didn't know a whole lot about D&D at that point, so I had no fucking clue what I was doing. And then we went to go do a one-shot. Me and Dane actually went to like Connecticut to do a one-shot with this guy, and for that character I played a Triton, but I played my other character's father many, many years before. And he had a different background, and that was the only way in which he was different from... his character was different, but even that character was so... That was a seafaring character, and the other one was no. What the fuck was he? Fuck, I don't remember the exact word for what he did, and that's the thing that is bothering me. I don't have my book on me, damn it.
Even that one sentence of me and Dane went to have this one shot with this guy could go in so many different ways. You're limited by your creativity, not really by the rules.
But I won't entirely lie. That was... whatever. Things got fun that night is all I will say. Anyway.
I'm starting to notice a theme, yeah.
Yeah. The theme in my life is that sex pops up often, and
which you wouldn't think when you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Right?
If someone's listening to this podcast backwards and they listen to this Dungeons and Dragons conversation, they'd then be more understanding of the fact that on Grindr we're not getting many responses.
You know what? It's funny because the one thing that I have found is like that people who are complete and total entire nerds are getting so much more action than I am, and I'm like, what? And I mean, I'm also an entire nerd, but like, it's not on surface level. Like, just looking at me, you might not see that. I mean, I'm doing it more and more now because like I literally made a Wonder Woman jacket the other day. Like, just.
I did see that. That was fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
But it's because they have a community that they are a part of, and they get to know each other in the community. Anytime you've got a community, instead of looking at the world at large, you're going to have more opportunities to have connections with people, sexual or otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that is literally the only reason at this point that I'm actually interacting with other people. That sounds so stupid, but like I honestly, because interacting with other people is stressful as hell. I just find that like, I find that like I'm not expressly only interacting with people because I want to sleep with them. No, I'm not doing that. But like, I do find that like it's really that's one of the big motivators for me of like, okay, I'm really tired. I don't necessarily want to go to this party. But who knows? Let's always ask that question. The who knows question. It comes up often, but
See, I'm at a point in my life where just going to a party just sounds tiresome. I will stay home with my Netflix.
Oh God,
I'm happy with that.
Parties are tiring. I didn't go out for Halloween except for like with my little siblings to like. Okay, I went out with my little siblings because my little siblings needed someone to go with them, and I had my Wonder Woman costume already, so I was wearing it that day anyway, so I figured I just won't take this off, and we will go out. And so we went out, and it was fucking fantastic, and we had a great time.
Well, here in Toronto, they shut down the Village, which is the gay area of Toronto. They shut down the streets for Halloween, and it just becomes a huge street party. And since I live in the Village, I just had to walk outside. That was nice and convenient for me.
Ah, yes. So how do you... So, I mean, this sounds like a weird question, but I'm going to roll with it anyway. This is not one of the standard questions, by the way, but how do you feel about Halloween in general? Like, what was your feeling about Halloween?
I've actually been baffled this year because through podcasting, I've gotten in touch with a lot of people from the rest of the world. And the fact that in a lot of the rest of the world, they don't have a day where they dress up and go out and just enjoy being weird and wacky and different. I find that baffling because it's just such a part of the culture. And Halloween is so big in the gay community. I don't understand how people aren't into it. Like, I haven't done a costume in a couple of years, but I still love the fact that people do it.
Oh, totally. If you could have done a costume this year, what costume would you have done?
The costume that I was planning on doing, but then I just decided not to, was a depressed rabbit.
Oh my God. I have a very clear image of what that looks like. Why do I just know instinctively what that would look like?
I know, right? And I really, really wanted to do it, but then I was like, maybe next year. Because like I used to have a small business that I ran out of my home of making puppets. So getting access to the fur, I think I actually have enough faux fur to have been able to do the costume still around. But yeah, I just love the idea of eventually I'm going to make a depressed rabbit costume.
Absolutely.
Because it's just stuck in my head.
And now I have a whole new round of questions because like not even specifically about puppetry because weirdly like, okay, so one, puppets are interesting but also low-key terrifying, but whatever, that's fine. I don't have an issue with them at all, me personally. I know a bunch of people that do, so like I'm not honest about that, but I want a little bit, because you mentioned that this is a thing that both you and your dad do. What are what are just like, if you could list hobbies, not necessarily in a chronological order, but like things that you know that you've gotten into and then maybe moved on to the next thing.
Okay.
What are some of the hobbies?
Well, I just have to look around the apartment and start listing things.
You know what? That makes sense.
Yeah. So I was big into guitar for a while. I've got a couple of guitars sitting in a corner. I still don't know how to play. I got I got up to like 5 or 6 chords for a while there and then just stopped. I've got some 3D printers over there that I was using to make Dungeons and Dragons related props and stuff, which I haven't used in quite some time. There's some puppet stuff right over there that really needs to be put away because I'm not making them anymore. Yeah, there's a lot of D&D figures around this place at the moment. So it's if I did find someone on Grindr, this is a strange apartment to bring them back to.
The puppets might be a problem.
Might be, but they're Sesame Street style, so they're not as creepy as they otherwise could be. There's a piano in the corner. Piano keyboard. Played that for a while. Stopped.
Understandable. It's fine. I love the piano.
I was a movie fanatic for a while, and there are probably 1,000 to 1,200 movies in here.
Oh shit!
Yeah, but they're all in like binders now instead of the cases, so they take up very little space. And I got to say, it's been a long time since I've opened those binders and cases. Mm-hmm. I find that hobbies tend to come back in a weird way. So every time I start a new hobby, there are elements that I have around from previous hobbies that just fold into it well.
Mm.
Like when I started podcasting, I had a lot of the gear that I needed and the microphones and so forth already from the puppetry times, because not only was I making puppets, I was also starting to make videos for the puppets, which are,
okay.
Yeah. So there was crossover there, and I already knew editing software from the puppetry thing.
I was about to
I've had so many hobbies.
I was about to ask about the tie-in from that. I'm like, how the fuck the video? I'm like, okay, I see. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I had the microphones, I had the mixing board. Some of these things were already there. Mm-hmm. But every time I pick up a new hobby, it reflects a previous hobby that I've had. Mm. And some of them come back. Like every so often, I'll get back into 3D printing, or I'll start practicing the guitar again, and then it'll go away. But I've heard, someone once told me that you can spot a good writer because they're not an expert in anything, but they know a lot of little things about a lot of stuff. And that's so I get very curious about things, and I want to find out everything about them. And when I think I've got a pretty good grasp on them, suddenly my interest goes to something new.
Mm. You can tell a good storyteller by the fact that they listen and learn and retain some things. I mean, granted, like, both you and I actually do have not great memories. Like, my memory is not actually that great. It always sounds like it's good. It's not. It's not. I promise you. It is not great.
One of my favorite things is when my friends tell stories about me, and I'm like, I've never heard this before, but I love listening to it.
Like, I remember none of this.
I remember none of it, but geez, I was hilarious that day or whatever. I don't remember stuff about my life. I remember everything about my hobbies.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I also have done a lot of those, and I would have done 3D printing had that been like a thing that was available for me to do. Like, I still want to do that because that would come in handy for like cosplay is a thing that I wanted to do for a while and still kind of want to do, and I guess still am going to do. But the way in which the way in which I'm going to do it, because it mostly is going to be superheroes. I just sort of know that that's going to be the case, and it's mostly going to be like, well, if I'm going to do a superhero, I'm going to do like a version of it that is wearable on a daily basis, as opposed to like, like, so for example, the Wonder Woman jacket is a good example of that. Like, I can wear that every day if I want to. It's a little costumey, yeah. Well, I mean, the new one is more costumey than the one before it. But like the original one of those jackets, I could literally just wear that every day. It's designed to be a biker jacket, and if I'm wearing a biker jacket because it's fucking cold out and whatever, like, yeah, then it'll work perfectly fine. And I like that. That's my, like, I was going to go into costume design at one point, and I guess I kind of still am. I do costume design for theater during the summer. But like that's the kind of thing that, like, if if I somehow got the call to work on Supergirl or Arrow, during and I was doing costumes for that, like what I would do would be a thing that I remember seeing a lot of in Smallville.
Just a slight interjection. Those shows, speaking of sexual harassment situations.
Oh no. Oh, what happened?
One of the producers.
Oh,
yeah.
That does not surprise me, actually, now that I think about it. But I'm wondering, I'll look it up after. I will look it up after. Because that doesn't surprise me, but I hope they don't cancel the shows because of it. Because I love those shows, and they are the impetus for a lot of the things that I've been working on lately.
It's none of the actors.
Yeah.
It's not the actors, so it's something that they can do behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's the piece of it that makes me a bit happier there. But, if I were to do costume design for them, one of the things that I saw in I think it was Smallville, where I saw it the first time was, so everybody knew that dude was going to be Superman, right? Like everybody fucking knew it. So what you would see in the things he was wearing would be like a belt buckle that was in the shape of the shield on the front of Superman's chest or something like that. And like it's tiny elements that hint at the hero that they will become, or maybe that they even are, but right now they're in a this is their everyday wear that hints at who they are when they're not being Clark Kent, for example. That's my favorite goddamn thing. Wearable, I like that in general. That's how I basically dress myself. That's on a daily basis. It feels like making something kind of fantastical as opposed to just leaving it. Sure, you could just wear these clothes, or your clothes could be telling a story. And I like that. I like it when the clothing in and of itself is hinting at a secret. That's really just a fascinating thing to me. And that's my main, I want someone to be able to draw inferences about the character through what they're wearing. Yeah. Even if it's we haven't revealed, okay, so I'm assuming, did you see Wonder Woman?
I did. It was amazing.
I agree. But one thing that I would have liked would have been if there had been some nod earlier on in the movie as to who Ares actually was.
Okay.
They did a sensational job of hiding who the hell he actually was going to be. They did a real good job. I was surprised as fuck at that last scene. I was like, wait, why the hell is he here? I was so surprised. So good job on them for that. But I've watched it twice in the same day, but honestly, that was on accident. I went earlier in the day because I hate going to movie theaters when there's a bunch of people there. It's the mildly antisocial part of my brain, but also the part of my brain that's I really just don't need the audience applauding during a simple part of this movie. That's my pet peeve in every movie theater is when something
my viewing
happens.
of Thor last weekend was ruined by the audience, no. I could see you not wanting to be around an audience.
Yeah, that's why I either won't see something the first week. Any Marvel movie, I'm not going to see it the first week. Marvel, I'm not that pressed about, really. I love them. I'm not pressed about seeing them immediately.
Yep.
And honestly, it really is just Thor at this point. Unless that deal goes through and they suddenly have access to all of the X-Men again. Oh, yes. I will be so here for every Marvel movie if they suddenly can just bring in the X-Men characters that they actually should just have access to already, but for fucking legal reasons. Oh! Anyway, because Black Panther should have Storm. Let's just, just need, it should have her. And the fact that she's not in it bothers me. It's really upsetting. So, that's but that could happen. It's a thing that could happen. We could get Black Panther 2, and that could be with Storm.
We got Spider-Man in Avengers, so anything's possible.
Right. And that was the best part. Actually, that wasn't the best part of the movie. The best part of the movie for me was Black Panther. duh. But like that was but like that was a close second to that. Like Black Panther and I actually still haven't seen Spider-Man Homecoming. It's been on my list of things to do, and I just haven't had the time.
It's pretty darn good.
I heard it was. I just haven't had the time. But like, it's one of those things that's up there. I've been catching up on podcasts instead of watching movies. So I'll get there. I will see it. I promise. But
well, in terms of hobbies, I've noticed that. At the moment, I've got one that's coming back. Well, actually, both of them are coming back.
Oh, yes.
Because they're kind of cyclical. They'll come back. Baking is coming back for me huge right now. The last couple of days, I've picked up a lot of baking goods, and the rest of this weekend is going to be trying some things out.
Oh my God,
the other thing...
I'm a pause you right there because I have to know what you're going to be baking.
I've never done a focaccia before, and now I want for some reason, and I desperately need to master focaccia.
You know what? That does sound complicated. I've never done that before in my life. That's a good plan. Let me know how that goes.
It was on the Canadian version of the Great British Bake Off this week. So focaccia has been on my head, and I'm like, I have to master this. The other thing that's coming back is actually, it's a deep dive, because I used to do this when I was like 10. But I found that I keep going to Kijiji and Craigslist looking for pottery wheels.
Oh my God. Oh, wow.
I have no idea where I would put it, but yeah.
That is really fascinating. That's not one I would have ever guessed. And not in any, like, that's just interesting in general, because like,
for some reason I've been hanging out on the Reddit sites for pottery, and there's a Cherico pottery guy on Facebook who just live streams as he's throwing pots, and it's the most soothing thing in the entire world. And yeah, so pottery I'm obsessed with right now.
I have to see that. Like, that, first of all, I hope you find that, because like, I want to see what you make, because that is amazing. Like, I haven't done that since literally high school, and that was because we were forced to do it one time in high school. I mean, I think I might have enjoyed it had I like done it more often, or like had it been actually explained in a way that was usable for me to understand, and whatever. Anyway, but like, it seemed really interesting. And I will send you the link to this Cherico pottery guy, because when he does episodes where he's painting them, not as good. But when he's sitting there just throwing them, it is the most soothing thing in the entire world. And it just makes my stress just evaporate. And also, he's very handsome. Oh, well, that helps too.
That helps too. Yeah,
that helps too.
And it's neat because of all of it's mostly women watching, and they're all trying to flirt with him heavily, and he will not talk about anything except pottery. So you could just watch the people getting more and more frustrated as they're trying to hit on this guy, and he's just talking about pottery. It's amazing.
Oh, that is so funny. I love that. Oh my God. Oh man. Oh God, that sounds so fun. I love it. Like, hobbies are just such a wonderful thing. Like, writing, I suppose, would have been technically what my hobby was for a while. And I guess now it's not really a hobby. It's like the next thing I will be doing in a manner that is like not, I don't know what the words exactly are for what I'm trying to say, but like it's not just a hobby anymore. It's definitely more, it's elevated past hobby into a thing that I'm doing that is a creative venture for me.
Well, yeah, and it's weird because my writing is now at a point where people who are supporting the podcast are paying the bills for the podcast. I mean, I'm not profiting off the podcast, but I'm breaking even, which is amazing. That there's an audience response out there that is like, I like what you're doing enough that I'm going to be putting some money towards it. That is just mind-blowing to me.
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful and deserves every penny of that. So that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. And I like, that's, oh man, that is my, well, I mean, I was going to say that's my goddamn dream, is to have this podcast pay for itself, but I by the time this episode airs, I will have actually finished this process already, but I'm joining a network, so my hosting costs will be gone for this show.
Nice.
So yeah, so like the show will now officially cost me nothing to do. It will just be a matter of me doing it, which is really fucking cool. But I would like for it to be like a thing that's funded so that the network can continue, obviously. But that's more of a that's part of the plan.
See, for fairy tales, I've had a very difficult situation because, like, I've been approached by networks, and at this point, I've had to turn them all down just because I'm so protective. It's such a short show, like 6 to 10 minutes, that suddenly having network branding on it and carrying promos for other shows just feels like it would be weird and weighty and just ruin the whole mood of it.
That makes sense.
So,
yeah.
For business reasons, I've had to turn those down because it doesn't feel right for the product.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that I think there's definitely a way that it could work. I just feel like the thing that's the issue is the advertising component of it. Like if it could be just a simple like a one line of like, check out the other shows on this network, and it's at the very end. Like after, if you found a moral this week, let me know.
Yeah.
Like if it's after that part, like I could see there being like one line about like, go check out this show, link in the description.
Yeah, but if I have to put on a 60-second thing about things, come check out Farts Are Us, our podcast about farts. Or
yeah, like fuck
it's
that.
weird.
That's not like that. Doesn't absolutely not like that's yeah. And I mean, so far, I'm still.
I mean, it could be a great Farts Are Us could be an amazing podcast.
Absolutely,
I'm not disparaging Farts Are Us.
I will, because one of the weird things. Bathroom humor's never been a thing that I can ever stomach. I just can't do it.
Then I'm warning you about Caverns and Comedians.
Oh, I'll be fine. It's whatever.
Okay, good.
No, it's one of those
good.
it's one of those like so I used to listen to Last Podcast on the Left, but that was one of the reasons I had to stop, was the joke. Well, actually what it wound up being was that it was the same joke just told multiple times.
Gotcha.
And I was like, but if the point of this is that you are trying to be funny and you are telling me the same joke every time, the joke loses its ability to be funny.
Well, I haven't listened to that podcast, but I did go to their live show about 2 months ago.
Oh, nice.
Because a friend had an extra ticket. So I was like, yeah, sure. I hear a lot of stuff about these guys. I'm going to watch. Not my cup of tea, but I can see why people are into it.
Yeah, that's sort of my feel on it. So like my true crime show, I do a general overview of a case, and then I link off to people who did like deeper research and whatever.
Okay.
I have no issue ever linking off to an episode that they did, unless when I listen to that episode, I know that they did something in that episode that was fucked up, and didn't apologize for it ever. Like, if they said something that was, like, homophobic, then I'm not at all going to then go and, like, recommend that episode. You know what I mean? Like, but if it, like, but if they apologize for it, like, during the episode, like, in the moment, or, like, one of them is like, but, bruh, that was fucked up. And then they're like, sorry. And then they just move on really quick. Like, at least someone called it out, and, like, that makes me a little more comfortable with sharing it. But, like, that doesn't, like, I think that that's happened, like, maybe twice or, like, 3 times possibly.
Well, and in improv, there's kind of an unwritten rule that if you're ever going to have a character who is just flat out racist or something like that, there should be someone in the scene who's going to be like, wait a minute. Because it kind of gives the audience that sense of security that people on stage know that they're being bad.
Right.
Because too often we sit there when stand-up comics are up there talking about homophobic situations, and they're just like, everyone with the audience is going to be right with you. But often, if you're talking about homophobic things, they're not right with you.
Yeah, like most of the time they're like, I'm only laughing because the person next to me is laughing and I don't want to be weird.
Yeah, this is an awkward situation. Whereas in improv, you tend to have that character come in and like point out, telegraph to the audience that this is an awkward situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So now I have questions about improv. See, like, because I actually, I've been to exactly one improv show in my life, and I fucking loved it. It was wonderful. But like, I also am still very new to the idea of improv as a thing. That sounds weird as a statement.
Gotcha.
But like obviously improv is a thing. But like, I'm new to it and all of the many things that it has to offer. So tell me how you came to appreciate improv.
Well, I was always a theatrically minded kid. Through high school, I was in the cast of like 30-something plays. We had a drama department at my high school. It wasn't an arts high school, but the drama department had this one guy who was amazing, Tim Wellborn, who just used every resource he could, and we were constantly doing plays. We had summer school where we were the only class in the entire high school, so we got to run around with no shoes on and just put on plays, which we brought back in the fall. And there were so many opportunities, and it was amazing.
Nice.
And when I went to university, I still accessed that sort of thing, but as a playwright. So I won a couple of awards at a community theater on campus and stuff like that. And then after that, I graduated, and it all went away. And I really missed it. And a friend of mine got involved with improv here in Toronto, and I started going out to shows and fell in love with it. And yeah, for a couple of years, I was big in the improv scene. I'm now out of it, and I'm happy to be out of it.
Had its own special set of problems, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, it had its own special set of problems, and it didn't seem to evolve. And it just became like these same people on stage at these different shows, one person running from one stage to the next, and they ended up being on stage 4 different places in the same night. And there was a lot of like, I'm sitting through this show that I'm not enjoying just so I can have 5 minutes of stage time.
Right.
And it cost more than, I'm not talking about like financial cost, but it just like
emotional costs and like
it cost more than I was getting out of it.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. Thank you so much for listening, Mixers and Hide and Seekers. I really appreciate and adore every single one of you. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. You can check the show notes for the links to all the socials. You can email me at mixterhyde, that's MYXTERHYDE @gmail.com. There are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to be listening. You can send the episode to a buddy that you think may want to hear us. Or if you would like to financially support the show, you can head over to patreon.com/mixterhyde. Intro music and outro music are by Aina Haina and Jahzzar, respectively. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. Stay safe, stay beautiful, and stay strange, listeners.